U.S. tariffs are set to kick in on March 4th, and it's looming large over Saskatchewan politics once again this week. Premier Scott Moe gave his assessment of a recent trip to Washington. Opposition leader Saddleback is continuing to call for an emergency sitting to address the threat. Plus, as you heard on the show yesterday, a renewed call to create a heritage fund. On top of it all, sports fans are channeling politics into a hockey game this evening. The 306 panel, a public affairs panel, is here to weigh in on all of that. Dale Richardson is principal at Earnscliffe Strategies. He's here in Regina. And Jack Saddleback is a professional speaker in Saskatoon. Good afternoon, Dale.
Good day.
And hello, Jack.
Hey, don't say.
I don't know why the good day threw me off for some reason.
Just trying to mix it up a little bit for
I
you,
like
Peter.
it.
It's very formal. Very formal.
So Premier Scott Moe is back from his trip to Washington, D.C., where he was part of that joint mission by Canadian premiers. We didn't hear much from Premier Moe yesterday beyond him declaring Canada will not be a 51st state, and President Trump, quote, may not be entirely accurate with the perceived facts. Dale, did you get any sense whether the premiers, were at all effective in changing minds and, stopping those tariffs?
I think we talked about it last time I was here. Nobody knows with President Trump. I mean, nobody knows, and that's a really difficult thing to have to deal with the president on this issue. So, I think the premier did fine in his press conference. I'm glad that he went to D.C. I'm even more glad that he went to Mexico. He was in Mexico, I think, after D.C. He was there on a trade mission. He is trying to promote this province, trying to increase our trade to Mexico. And it wasn't just him that went to Mexico. His government, his team, in the last couple of weeks, they were in not just Mexico, they were in Vietnam, Singapore, I think India, many other countries recently. And I think that people in this province should be taking note of that. If the U.S., even if it is still going to be our biggest trading partner, if they are going to evolve into being an enemy of Canada's, I think that our government in this province, they should be applauded for trying to take Saskatchewan's interests to other places in the world. And so, I think that they deserve a big round of applause for that.
We touched on it a little bit last time you guys were here, but is that just the new norm where we're going to be seeing our government, all around the world making these pitches?
Yes, no, yeah. And it needs to be. And keep in mind, Peter, when Scott Moe ran for the Sask Party leadership, doing this was actually one of the main planks of his platform. He said back in 2017 that Saskatchewan needs to be taken to the rest of the world. We need to expand our presence and our government's presence. And they've opened trade offices in a number of places, like places that I just mentioned, Japan, Germany, series of other countries in the world. And unfortunately, from time to time, they've been criticized for traveling to those places. Mm-hmm. And certainly government costs need to be kept low to do it. But I am fine with any expense that is paid for the premier and his government to take Saskatchewan's interests to the world. And I hope other people in this province believe that as well.
Jack, you can share any thoughts you have on that as well, but I'm also curious for your thoughts on whether it's time for a different strategy when it comes to dealing with specifically President Trump.
With Dale's point, I'm really glad that you brought up that Moe had gone to Mexico to be able to go and have some discussions down there, because we don't really hear about that a lot, at least in past governments. But it is important that we really start to diversify our marketplaces, as Dale, you've been alluding to. Now, when we're looking at globalization, that this is a part of that symptom. Both it is a good thing that we're able to diversify our markets and rely on each other, but on the flip side, we certainly are seeing the negative or cons that are happening with globalization, where we have relied a lot on our southern partner, that being the Americans. And this now administration is showing to be quite volatile. So we kind of got to treat it as it is, a very volatile administration. And unfortunately, we can be in a nice kind of like neighborly relationship where, I can love you, but right now I just don't like you. And essentially, we got to be on our toes. And I I believe we've been saying this when we started talking about this administration, and we'll continue to say it as we go along.
Well, this time yesterday, we did hear those comments from Premier Moe. We also heard from Carla Beck, the NDP, once again calling for the provincial government to get back to the ledge. But the spring sitting isn't resuming until March 19th, which is also budget day. It will be one of the few times the government will not face, a few weeks of questioning before issuing a budget. Jack, what are your thoughts on the government not calling the legislature back early and doing it on budget day on March 19th?
I'm a little disappointed that they're not pulling a sitting together prior to the budget day. There needs to be some proper vetting with budgets that go forward, some questions, some back and forth. The opposition needs to be able to do their job and critique the government, hold them accountable, create transparency. What kind of irks me is that Moe doesn't seem to want to do that. And I can see on one side that, he doesn't want to have to sit down and have these theatrics if folks are going to think it as such. But on the other side, it's important that we hold our governments accountable. And it would be a great show of leadership that transparency is there, that being able to reach across the aisle, to be able to work with opposition, hear their concerns as we're sitting in this very volatile situation with our neighbors to the south, that it's in the best interest of Saskatchewan to hear folks out, even if he doesn't want to hear them out.
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, the spring session of the Legislative Assembly typically starts the first Monday in March. So, yeah, it's March 19th. That's about, 2.5 weeks later than normal. The 2 weeks before budget, though, Peter, is such a waste of time. When I worked in the legislative building, and still now, it is 2.5 weeks of just theatrics. I mean, Jack pointed it out. It's all just a lead up to the budget. It's like going to a concert and you have to listen to the local band playing before Taylor Swift comes on. People are there to see the main event. I have no problem with this. I think it's fine. And this idea, I don't know, it kind of seems like the opposition or some other people, they're making it seem like the Premier and his government that they're not working if they're not having a legislative session. I would submit that they are working harder when the session is not going on, because they are just able to do more. They can travel. They can go to the U.S. They can go and meet their new trading partners. They can take this head on with the levers of government that they have, instead of sitting in the Assembly. It is important. It's where the laws of the province are made. It's it's critical having a session, but I don't think that this somehow hurts our province in any way doing this at all.
Let me just hop on that, and more specifically, this is a unique year, obviously, with the tariff talks. Do you think there's any benefit to our to having the ledge based on that, more working together? Is there any more access for the public? I mean, Carla Beck was talking about bringing businesses, industry, and things like that. Is there any more representation?
I don't understand that argument at all, because it again implies that on the government side in particular that they're not meeting with or listening to any kind of stakeholder. I know 100% for sure, because of the work that I do. The government is engaging with as many partners and stakeholders right now as they possibly can. It is a crisis that the government is in. Our country is in a crisis. They are doing as much as they can and talking and working with as many people as they possibly can. So, and to your question about having the opposition in and having more people, it brings politics into it. The NDP wants to have a session, and I understand it. They want to advance their own political interests. Of course, it makes sense for them to do it. But this is an issue where politics really should not be involved. And in the Legislative Assembly, it's all politics.
Yesterday on the show, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation came on to call on the province to create a heritage fund. In 2013, then Premier Brad Wall commissioned former U of S President Peter McKinnon to do a report. Nothing was really materialized from that. Jack, what do you think? Why doesn't Saskatchewan have a heritage fund, and should they?
So I read the report that came out, and certainly for folks who don't know about the organization themselves, they're nonpartisan, they're not-for-profit, but they can also write a pretty spicy piece. So take it with a grain of salt should you want to read the report. What I did find beneficial about reading the report is the fact that we as Saskatchewan, should we have invested back what is in 2013, would have had a income of roughly $162 million annually on this trust fund. Should we have followed through with the report that came through McKinnon. So with the aspect of investing in non-renewable resources and are taking all of that investment and putting it into this trust fund, it's better late than never. I honestly think, looking at these numbers and looking at the future of Saskatchewan, that we need to be able to start padding the pockets of this province a little bit more, and do so while we have the leverage in this point in time. Non-renewables are just that. They're non-renewables. They will eventually dry up. Oil is not always going to be there. Certainly, it's probably still going to be there in my lifetime and in your lifetime, and maybe in a generation or two. But research has also shown that we need to start divesting away from non-renewables and start looking at renewables, because climate change is pretty wild. All of us have in Saskatchewan have been able to feel that this past 3 weeks with the negative 30 degree wind chills that have been out there, and now we're stepping into the next few days that are going to be 3 degrees on Sunday. That is a direct part of climate change, and this talk of the Heritage Fund and taking what we can from non-renewable resources and investing it into the future of Saskatchewan is in my personal opinion, a good move for our province to make.
Dale, it's kind of just like a personal savings account. It's never a bad idea, right? It seems like a bit of a no-brainer, but obviously it's not. What are your thoughts just on the Heritage Fund?
It's a nice idea. I think it's unlikely to happen anytime soon. And the reason, just kind of alluding to our last conversation there, is politics. There are political realities of the day and fiscal realities of the day, which result in government having to invest money into particular parts of the government. Healthcare costs are going to keep going up. Healthcare is never going to go down, unfortunately. There is going to be a demand for new and better schools and hospitals. Highways need to be better. And not to mention, and I think the Taxpayers Federation that they mentioned this, before they get to the Heritage Fund, the government needs to pay off its debt,
right? Which
is a very worthy thing to be doing. I don't think anybody would say that shouldn't be done.
Can you do both?
Not.
Alberta's doing. They have a Heritage Fund.
They have a significantly higher amount of resource royalties than we do in this province. And on that note, Saskatchewan, we rely on potash royalties and a series of other resource royalties. We've seen in the last decade something like potash. It can go up sky high, and it can come down. It can come down as fast as it went up. So, Heritage Fund, it's a great idea. I'd love to see it, but in reality, it seems unlikely.
All right.
Sorry to break the news to you.
This is an unusual one for the panel, but I got to talk about it. Canada and the U.S. facing off tonight at the Four Nations face-off. During the last emotional game, the American national anthem was booed. The game had 3 fights in 9 seconds. Dale, were you one of the people booing at home, or are you invested in this?
I tried tuning into the last game against the Americans, and I don't know if it was on really late, but I went on to TSN, and I assumed it was on there, and it turns out it wasn't on TSN.
Sportsnet.
It was on Sportsnet, and that's the one I don't subscribe to. But I don't know if I'll tune in. I haven't walked my dog in, it seems like, more than a week, so I might do that instead of watching the hockey game tonight. But I don't know. Yeah, I hope Canada wins, obviously.
What do you think just about sports and politics kind of intersecting in general? Does that make you dislike it or like it?
I don't like it. I don't like it. I really was disturbed a number of years ago when Donald Trump, when he was president the first time around, when the Colin Kaepernick kneeling thing during the national anthem, when that was a thing, and he made a big stink about that, and I saw that as him bringing politics into it. And I didn't like that. I don't like it in general, and they should be separate. I mean, sports can be a very uniting thing, and you bring politics into it, and then that's not the case.
Well, it's uniting Canadians against the Americans in hockey, at least. Jack, have you been watching, or do you just have any thoughts on the real-life implications of this?
Okay, girl. I like sports, but that's not necessarily my type of sport. I'm a big CFL fan, so shout out to the Rough Riders. With like the whole idea that sports and politics should be separate. In an ideal world, we certainly would have that. In an ideal world, we would have the separation of church and state. We would have things in their own little pockets. But humans be humaning, and the players that are out there playing tonight in this game have their own feelings about it. The fans who are out in those stands also have their own feelings about it. With what's happening, and I feel like we've said this for the past 5-6 years, we are in unprecedented times. I think now it's just like the norm where and I just said it again earlier, we have to be on our toes. And one of the ways that people can safely and without stepping on each other's toes too much is be able to show their displeasure with what's happening by booing at a particular anthem. Whether or not people agree with that is their own prerogative, but it's the easiest and safest way for them to be able to show what they're about without being put into tougher, violent aspects.
Well said, Jack. Dale, Jack, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.